On a lonely road, a vet noticed a filthy, matted dog trailing behind his car. At first, he thought it was just a stray desperate for food. But when the animal refused to leave him alone, the truth hit him like a storm, so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. The sun was setting low on the horizon as Dr. Hayes, a weary veterinarian, drove along the empty stretch of road toward home. His day had been long, filled with surgeries, vaccinations, and anxious pet owners. All he wanted now was silence, a shower, and a few hours of rest before it all began again tomorrow. But fate had other plans. The eye in his rearview mirror movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, but then he noticed it, a dog, filthy and matted, stumbling down the road behind his car. Dr. Hayes frowned, easing his foot off the gas. Strays were common in the area, but something about this one was different. He wasn't wandering aimlessly. He was following. The farther Dr. Hayes drove, the harder the dog pushed himself, limping but determined. Every turn of the wheels seemed to pull the animal forward, as if he knew this car, this man, might be his only chance. The vet's chest tightened. He had seen desperate animals before, but never one this relentless. Dr. Hayes slowed his car to a crawl, his eyes fixed on the sight in his mirror. The dog's fur was a tangled mess, matted into clumps that looked more like rags than a coat. His ribs pressed against his skin with every breath, and his gait carried a slight limp, each step a struggle against exhaustion. Yet he didn't stop. Not once. The dog's tongue lolled from his mouth, his body trembling with fatigue, but his eyes, those weary, pleading eyes, never lost their focus. They stayed locked on the vehicle, silently begging for it not to disappear. It wasn't hunger alone driving him forward. It was something deeper, a desperate need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be helped. Dr. Hayes gripped the steering wheel, his heart tightening as he watched. He had spent years treating animals in pain, but this one carried something different. This wasn't just neglect. This was abandonment carved into every line of his body. And still, the dog pressed forward, as if he refused to let his last chance slip away. For a few long minutes, Dr. Hayes kept driving, his thoughts caught in a storm of logic and conscience. He told himself it wasn't safe to stop on the empty stretch of road. He reasoned that maybe the dog would eventually wander off to find food or shelter. But every time he glanced into the mirror, the same heartbreaking sight trailed behind him. The vet's chest tightened. He had rescued countless animals before, but this was different. Something about the dog's persistence gnawed at him. Why follow him specifically? Why refuse to give up, even with exhaustion written across every trembling muscle? Questions battled with his exhaustion, leaving him torn between caution and compassion. Finally, Dr. Hayes sighed, his resolve breaking. He slowed to a stop and pulled over onto the shoulder. Dust swirled around the car as the engine hummed softly in the silence. In the mirror, the dog stumbled closer, each step heavy but determined. Dr. Hayes placed a hand on the door handle, his pulse quickening. He was about to find out what this desperate animal wanted. Dr. Hayes stepped out of his car, the evening wind brushing against his face as he turned toward the stumbling figure. The dog slowed but did not stop. His head was lowered, his tail limp, yet his eyes, those haunting, amber eyes, locked onto the vet with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. The closer he came, the clearer his condition became. His fur hung in heavy mats, coated with dirt and dried mud, and his body carried scars both fresh and old. But what broke Hayes most was the silence. The dog didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't make a sound. He simply stood there, chest heaving, staring as if to say, "Help me." Kneeling down, Hayes extended a cautious hand. For a heartbeat, the dog hesitated, trembling between instinct and trust. Then, slowly, he inched forward, pressing his nose against the vet's palm. The gesture was so simple, yet so powerful. It wasn't a demand, it wasn't aggression. It was a plea without words, one that pierced straight through Hayes' heart. As Dr. Hayes ran his hand gently along the dog's back, he felt more than just the jut of bones beneath matted fur. His fingers brushed against something foreign, rough, tight, and cruelly embedded in the skin. With a sinking heart, he pulled the fur aside and froze. A piece of rope, frayed and stained, had been tied so tightly around the dog's midsection that it had cut into the flesh. His throat tightened as he examined further. There were sores where the rope had rubbed raw, scars of repeated neglect, and deep scratches that spoke of desperate attempts to free himself. Whoever had done this hadn't simply ignored the dog. They had trapped him, abandoned him, and left him to suffer. Rage simmered beneath Hayes' sorrow, but above it all, a wave of helpless compassion washed over him. The dog stood quietly, trembling, as if resigned to his fate. But his eyes never left Hayes. And in that moment, the vet understood. This animal hadn't chased him out of chance. He had been searching for someone, anyone, who could finally set him free. Without hesitation, Dr. Hayes scooped the trembling dog into his arms. The animal didn't resist, only sagged against him with a shuddering sigh, as if surrendering to the first kindness he had felt in years. Hayes placed him gently in the back seat, his hands steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. The drive to the clinic was silent, the dog's weary eyes following every turn as though he finally believed he was safe to the clinic. The transformation began. Hayes carefully cut away the filthy mats of fur, each snip revealing patches of tender, scarred skin. He cleaned the sores, disinfected the wounds, and wrapped the raw flesh with bandages. Fresh water was set before the dog, and he drank greedily, tail giving a faint wag as warmth spread through his tired body. For hours, Hayes worked, treating injuries, administering fluids, whispering reassurance with every gentle touch. And, with every step, he saw life returning. The hollow gaze began to soften, the trembling slowed, and by the time the dog drifted into sleep, Hayes knew he had saved far more than just a body. The next morning, Dr. Hayes returned to check on his patient. The dog lifted his head weakly, tail brushing against the blanket in a slow, grateful wag. As Hayes adjusted the bandages, something caught his eye, a faint mark on the worn collar still clinging to the dog's neck. Leaning closer, he traced the faded letters etched into the cracked leather. It wasn't random. It was a name. A lump formed in his throat as memories stirred. Years ago, Hayes had treated an elderly man who adored his German shepherd. The man had brought him in regularly, always speaking of the dog as his only family. But the visits had stopped, and Hayes had later learned the old man had passed away. Now, staring at the neglected creature before him, realization crashed down. The same dog had found his way back to him. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "You remembered me all this time." The dog pressed his head into Hayes' chest, a silent confirmation. And for the first time in years, both man and animal felt whole again. In the days that followed, the clinic became more than a place of healing. It became a home. The dog, once frail and broken, began to rise on steadier legs. His fur grew softer, his wounds closed, and his eyes, once clouded with despair, now glowed with trust. Each morning, he followed Dr. Hayes from room to room, never letting him out of sight, as though afraid to lose him again. The bond between them deepened quickly. Hayes no longer saw him as just a patient. He was family. He brought him home, setting out a warm bed, fresh meals, and toys to remind the shepherd what it meant to live without fear. And in return, the dog gave him something priceless, unwavering loyalty, the kind only born from suffering and survival. One evening, Hayes knelt beside him, brushing a hand through his fur. "You're safe now," he whispered. The shepherd rested his head on the vet's lap, eyes closing in peace. For both man and dog, it wasn't just recovery. It was a second chance, a promise of love unbroken.